Record, will the witness please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. Could you state your name for the record and spell your last name?
My name is Mary Adamson, ADAMSON.
Would counsel for PG&E please proceed with your witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Adamson.
Good morning.
What materials are you sponsoring in this proceeding?
I'm sponsoring my direct testimony, Exhibit 6, Chapter 6, my statement of qualifications in Exhibit 13, Exhibit 18, Chapter 38, which is a rebuttal to the DRA direct testimony, and also sponsoring supplemental testimony.
And that supplemental testimony reducing your request has been marked as PG&E 28, and it's entitled Supplemental Revision June 7th, 2006, Chapter 6, Internal Auditing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Were these materials prepared by you or under your supervision and control?
Yes, they were.
And do you adopt them today as your testimony?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Your Honor, Ms. Adamson is tendered for cross-examination.
Thank you. All of those documents have been previously marked and identified as exhibits, with one exception, that being the supplemental revision dated June 7, 2006 to Chapter 6, Internal Auditing, and I hereby mark and identify that document as Exhibit PG&E-28 off the record, and you are speaking very softly, so if you could try to speak louder or into the mic. Thank you. On the record, counsel for DRA ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please do.
Good morning, Mrs. Adamson. My name is Paul Angelopoulos. I'm an attorney for Division of Ratepayer Advocates.
Good morning.
Could you turn to DRA's Exhibit 40, which is this large book? I believe you have that in front of you?
Is that the 6-4-1
Yeah.
marked in the far right-hand corner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, on page 6/4-1, there's a Pacific Gas and Electric Company response to data request from DRA number ORA 0095-002. Do you see that?
Yes.
And were you responsible for answering that data request?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and that asks for a detailed, complete written description of the different types of assignments for which this PCC is responsible, which is the Internal Audit Department. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you did you this answer yourself?
I did it in consultation with a database that we have in the department and with other people in the department to provide the complete response.
Okay. And I got with regard to the next two data requests, which you can see in that book, are handwriting in the bottom right-hand corner, 6/5-1 and 6/6-1, which are data requests ORA 0095-003 and 0095-004.
Right, correct.
Okay. With regard to 00995-003 on 6/5-2, there's some handwriting on that page. That's not your handwriting, correct?
Correct. When we sent these in, they were typewritten on white paper, and I don't believe there was any handwriting on them.
Okay. So to the extent that these do not have handwriting on, do they represent the responses you sent to DRA?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Thank you. The only issue I'd like to ask you a few questions on pertains to your rebuttal testimony in Chapter 38, Exhibit PG&E 18, Section E, regarding the allocation of costs to customers, particularly at pages 38.4 through 38.7. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the essential difference between your 2007 forecast for your department and DRA's is that you've requested that ratepayers fund 99% of the internal audit department's costs, whereas DRA has recommended that ratepayers pay 91% of that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, my understanding of PG&E's fundamental position on ratepayer funding on holding company costs is that ratepayers should fund all costs incurred by the holding company, that's PG&E Corp, that do not exclusively benefit the holding company. Is that right?
I believe we agree.
Okay. Is another way to describe it to say ratepayers should fund all costs incurred by the holding company except those that would not be incurred if the corporation did not exist and the utility was a standalone company?
Your Honor, I'd like to interpose clarification. Can you refer to Ms. Adamson's testimony for this what you're referring to? Are you quoting from Ms. Adamson's testimony?
It's my understanding of what the gist of it. I'm not quoting word for word. No, it's my interpretation of what your position is.
Whose position?
PG&E's position on the holding, the responsibility that ratepayers should have funding corporate costs.
So you're not asking for Ms. Adamson's testimony. You're asking for her understanding of what the company's position is overall on this policy matter?
No, restricted to her understanding of the internal auditing department's request for ratepayer funding.
Could you repeat your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
And you're referring to my last question, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your position that the ratepayer should fund all the internal auditing department's costs incurred by the whole, except those that would not be incurred if the corporation did not exist and the utility was a standalone company?
Yes.
Okay, and you through your rebuttal testimony, I understand that your position, you've got a different position to what DRA has, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and DRA's position is that ratepayers should fund only those internal auditing department costs incurred that benefit the utility and its ratepayers, as opposed to those costs that benefit the corporation and its ratepayers. Is that
And
your
we agree
understanding?
with that, yes.
You agree with that, or is that
Yes,
you agree
we
that
do.
that's a
Excuse me,
description of-
I'm sorry. I'd like to instruct my witness not to respond
Oh,
until
okay.
the counsel for DRA finishes his question.
Oh, I apologize.
I know it's not like conversation. So, you said you agree with that. Do you agree that that's your understanding of DRA's position, or you agree that that ratepayers should fund only those costs that benefit the corporation and its shareholders?
We agree that internal auditing costs should be paid for by the consumers that benefit from our audits, and that includes all the audits that are performed on organizations that benefit the utility entity.
Okay.
I guess I still don't understand exactly what you're trying to get. I mean, if you read my testimony, I explain why we excluded incremental audits from it, and what's remaining benefits the utility. We already excluded the incremental audits.
Again, by incremental audits, you mean audits that benefit the corporation exclusively?
Correct.
Okay.
Ms. Adamson,
Yes.
I hate to interrupt. I think the court reporter is straining to hear. So if you
I'm
could,
sorry.
Thank you.
Ms. Adamson, your criticism of DRA's method is described in your answers to questions 11 through 14 on pages 38.5 through 38.7 of your rebuttal testimony, correct?
Yes.
And you essentially argue that DRA did not consider, and I'll quote, which of these audits currently being performed at PG&E Corporation would need to be performed at the utility if there were no PG&E Corporation, because the organizations and auditable units would then reside in the utility. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are you saying that PG&E has determined that 99% of the work performed by the Internal Auditing Department benefits the utility?
Yes.
You're not saying that only 1% of the Internal Auditing Department's work benefits the corporation, are you?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, now Mr. Baumgartner looked at DRA's witness for this part of DRA's testimony. He looked at your response to his questions in data request 0095-004, which you can find on 6/6-1.
I'm familiar with them, yes.
Okay, and that asks for a detailed breakdown of your department's auditing hours in the base year 2004 and the entity for whom that work was performed, as well as your response to, if you look at your response to data request 0095-003, and he calculated the ratio of audit time spent in the corporation as a client entity and came up with 9% of the total time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you agree that in 2004 the Internal Auditing Department spent 9% of its auditing time working on audits where the corporation was the client?
Yes, we did. It was an unusual year.
Would you agree with me that the work done for the corporation as a client by the Internal Auditing Department was done for the corporation's benefit?
It benefited entities, some of which reside in the corporation now that formerly resided in the utility, and it also, some of the work benefited organizations that reside in the corporation which would not exist if there were no corporation. So it benefited both types of entities. That's how we determine what was incremental and non-incremental.
Your position is that as long as those audits that relate to the corporation would take place at the utility, if PG&E Corp didn't exist, the ratepayer should pay for it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean that even though there's work done that benefits the corporation, it should still be paid by the ratepayers?
Yes.
So let's take 2004 as an example. Even though the Internal Auditing Department spent 9% of its time working on audits where the corporation was a client, that those audits would still have to be performed if the utility was a standalone company?
Not all 9%.
How much of that would have to be done?
63% of the 9% in that particular year were incremental audits required by preparation for the first year of SOX implementation, which was 2004. So, for example, our IT department spent 30% of its time at the holding company, which is extremely unusual amount of time, in 2004. That's not a normal plan audit year.
I'm sorry, just so I'm clear, the 63% of that 9% is properly chargeable to the utility? Is that what you're saying?
The 63% of the 9% is chargeable to the corporation.
And not the utility?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and that was an extremely unusual year. So it does not represent our normal, any 1 year of our normal 4-year audit plan.
And you provided enough information for ORA to be able to distinguish what you regard as the difference between 2004 and the other years?
I believe we did.
And that's all to be found in your work papers and your testimony?
Yes, they asked for information about the audits that we've performed and our audit plans for the years 2000 through 2004. And by looking at those and by looking at our information about what kind of audits are considered incremental and not incremental and what falls into we explain in the testimony the way our audit plans are prepared and the fact that it covers a 4-year period so that any one particular year is actually not representative of our complete support to either the corp or the utility. The percentages are typically between 95% at the utility and 5% at the corp, and sometimes 96% at the utility and 4% at the corp. And that's an average across that 4-year period. 2004 was exceptional because of the requirement for SOX preparation work.
And how often is that done?
That 2004 was an interesting year for corporations across the United States. Audit departments around the country had to redesign their audit plans and spend a tremendous amount of time working on SOX preparation to prepare themselves for the filings at the end of that year.
So with these auditing plans that you talk about in your
Yes.
testimony, did you provide those
Yes,
to
we did.
DRA?
Yes, we did.
Did you provide those in written form to DRA?
Yes, I believe one of the data requests was for our audit plan information for the years 2000 through 2004.
Can you show me where that is, please?
Let's see, ORA DR 3-05, requested by Donna Faye Bauer, requested copies of our risk-based audit plan for 2001 through 2005.
Okay, and you provided it in response to that
Yes,
data
we
request?
did.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Adamson, if the internal auditing department did not perform services for PG&E Corporation, would the corporation have to hire people to perform those services?
Perhaps for those entities that are remaining, that are incremental.
Okay, and if you did hire people to perform these services, what percentage of the internal auditing department's costs that you're requesting in this GRC do you believe would have to be spent by the corporation to get those services?
I couldn't answer that. That seems speculative to me. I haven't studied anything about that.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Is there any redirect?
May I go off the record, please?
Off the record. direct for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Is there any objection to receiving into evidence Exhibit P